Welcome back to the Stakehouse for the second off-season episode where we're talking all things going on in the world of football while we've got no predicting to be done. I'm Conall McCabe. I'm joined once more by Lucas Dazinski, and today we're going to be discussing the Champions League revised format that came to play in 2024-25 season. Talk about how well we felt it went, whether it achieved what it wanted to achieve, and come in and throw a new idea at you for how we think it could be improved in the 2025-26 season, which we'd love your feedback on. So, Lucas, good to see you once more. Let's dive straight in. The format this year, did it work for you or did it not?
I personally quite liked it, to be honest. There was way more games. It started earlier as well. There was no kind of long winter break as there was before. 8 games in the group stage was quite good, and also I feel like it gave opportunity for the slightly worse teams to kind of have a better chance of maybe getting through in a way. And there was more excitement, right? Because in the group stage it was top 2 go through, right? And usually the bottom 2, the ones who are favourites to not go through the next group stage don't usually make it. But it's made it a bit more interesting. There were some teams, really good teams, who were barely made it through the knockout stage, right? So I think the format is good. Most importantly, there's more games, right? Obviously, that's what UEFA want: more games, more money. At first I was a bit skeptical about changing the whole format, but I don't think it was that bad, to be honest.
Yeah, the game setup worked really well, I think, rather than having to play every team twice, like in the group stages, and you got 8 games against 8 different teams, which was quite nice. I mean, ultimately, the idea behind changing the format was to make sure that they were safeguarding against a new Super League takeover, right? And that's the primary reason for making the changes. And in that scope, it was mission accomplished. Overall, it worked well. The structure was good. The playoffs came with a degree of excitement. Yeah. And generally, you can't have many over complaints about it. And I think as a whole, it was a really successful format change. However, there were 3 points that I identified as still being a little bit problematic. Okay. So the point number 1 is obviously the top 8 qualify automatically. Mm-hmm. Once you guarantee your spot in the top 8, there's not a huge amount to play for. Yeah. So what you can then find is teams who are secure putting out reserved or weaker sides, again, due to the lack of games. And then, obviously, it doesn't result in the fairest competition when they're going against teams fighting to get into the playoffs and things like this. So that was one issue. The second issue is when you've got so many teams that can qualify for the playoffs, down to 24. Ultimately, again, there's a lot of teams in the mix that, either don't have an awful lot to play off in the last game or second last game week because they're secure of a playoff place and nothing else. And at the same time, you also have a little bit of arrogance from the likes of PSG. And the likes of Real Madrid, who are kind of to be honest, we don't mind going into the playoff because we'll back ourselves to win it if we have to. Yeah. So there are 2 issues. And then the third issue, which is the biggest one, is you look at someone like Liverpool, who were really unlucky with their draw, right? So, they won the league. Ideally, they should have been rewarded with an easier last 16 tie. And obviously, it did not pan out that way. Now, of course, that problem can happen in the old format because a team like Real Madrid could come second in their group, and then that could still happen. Yeah. But rather than worrying about that, let's think about moving forward, how we could solve these 3 problems. And I've got something that I've come up with, which I think is not to, put myself under pressure here, but is genius, right? Absolute genius. You're going to love this. So what you do is at the end of the group stages and at the end of the playoffs. So you have your established top 8, and then you have the other 8 teams that are joining them after winning their playoff games, and you're left with 16. Instead of trying to match the winner to the lowest ranked playoff or anything like this,
another draw,
which can cause carnage, what UEFA should do is allow the winner to choose who they play.
No, you can't do that. No.
Hear me out. So the winner chooses.
Surely they're going to pick the bottom team then.
Let them. They deserve to. That's a reward. The winner chooses. Second place then chooses. Third place then chooses. So let's talk about the 3 problems. Number 1, now, even if you secure in the top 8, you're not going to play reserves because it's in your interest to finish as high up as possible so that you get to choose and have an easier game in the last 16. In the playoffs, same thing. You're always pushing to get higher because there's a chance that you can even get to select your game later on down the line. And thirdly, let's supposing Real Madrid and PSG again were to find themselves in the playoffs, they'd almost definitely end up playing each other in the last 16 because nobody would pick to play them. So by doing it that way, then you give much more incentive for teams, not just to finish in the top 8 or to consolidate a playoff spot or whatever it is, but to finish as high as possible in the league. And then basically they then get to choose who they play in the last 16. It actually solves each of the 3 problems that this system encountered this year. Not only that, right? Think of the extra drama around it. Can you imagine the discussions? You could even, UEFA love their money, don't they? You could even do it on a live broadcasted conference call or something like that. Can you imagine that? How much fun that would be? I mean, imagine the rights holders arguing, fighting to get that. You do it all live on a conference call and they each choose the team that they want. And in addition, you've got all this trying to second guess who everybody's going to choose and so on and so forth. I mean, do Liverpool, if they win it again, do they go for the far-flung game against the easier team, which messes up their travel plans? Or do they play the closer-to-home team, which might give them a bit more trouble? I think there's just so many different factors to consider here. And as well as making, whoever it is, the TVs, UEFA more money, it also, as fans, gives us so much more to speculate, so much more to talk about, and so many more permutations to consider. I think, personally, it would make it really, really exciting.
I mean, it does sound exciting, a bit of a circus, to be honest, and the whole, picking what team you want to play. And because of that, I don't think it will happen. But it's an interesting idea, to be honest.
It doesn't have to be a circus, though. I think it can just be very straightforward. Rather than, ultimately, when the playoffs finished, we didn't really.
Yeah, but the drama, there's just going to be so much drama. Do you know what I mean?
But isn't that a good thing?
Yeah, I mean that's a good thing. But is that present in any other sport, any competition? Have you come across
so
it?
It happens in. I don't know much about American sports, right? But they've got things like draft over there, where there's an element of that in some of their sports. But that's not where I got the idea. I got the idea and ended up talking to somebody else about it, and he mentioned that that's what can happen in some American sports. But
oh, really? Okay.
I just think that it would add an extra layer of, as you say, drama, and I think it would make it more exciting, and give clubs the incentive not just to finish in the top 8, but to go ahead and try and win the league, which I don't think there was enough incentive to do this year, or even finish as high as they can in the playoffs. Which again,
so what are you going to call this format? The Conall format?
No, mate. We can share credit. The Stakehouse format. The Stakehouse format. But listen, it's obviously an idea. It's not really probably a realistic idea. I don't know why something like this couldn't be implemented. But even just your natural reaction there, probably shared by governing bodies, even if there's no specific reason behind it, right? And so therefore, I'm guessing something like this happening or coming to fruition is unlikely. But how good would it be to see it? If you like what we're talking about here and you want to throw your weight behind it, get involved, if we get enough support on the issue...
Our campaign.
Maybe we'll start a petition, we'll send it to UEFA, we'll go to Switzerland, Lucas, we'll put some suits on, speak to them and see if we can get this implemented, because I think it would massively make the competition even better.
We'll just take 10% of the prize money.
Yeah, we can negotiate even harder than that. Let's see. They've got plenty of money, those guys, and we've just earned them a lot more. So there you have it. Look, just a little bit of fun with that one. I think it's always important for UEFA to continue to think outside the box in terms of how they can improve this Champions League format, because while it did work, if there are ways to improve it, they should always be looked at and considered. But yeah, be really interesting to get your thoughts out there. So let us know what you think to that idea, and if you've got any of your own ideas in terms of improving the current Champions League structure. Thanks for listening to this one. We'll see you again soon for the next one, looking at more of the transfers and other goings on in the world of football.
Cheers.